kicking off with this position. It's black to play. This is from a game between Kerez and Alekhine from 1936. And I'll show you how the game went first of all. Alekhine won it. This is just winning for black, and Alekhine managed to sort of successfully win it. The engine reckons it's... in fact, the engine reckons Alekhine's move is the best move because it's a checkmate in 20 as opposed to a completely different plan that's going to be checkmating a lot more moves. But I think the more practical, it's the more risk-free plan basically. So Alekhine's calculated it all and makes a run for it here with King G4. So we see D6, we see G2, King F2, King H3, D7, E3 check. Brilliant move, and I mean, what does White do there? They can't take the pawn because black or queen with check, so they just have to put their king on E2 or F3. I guess E2 is probably not the cleverest place to go. No, because then if the king goes to E2, then when we queen, we're gonna, well, we could just quickly see that. To be honest, this will be even easier when white queens. We'll see check. King has to come to D1, and then we've got check and queening. So the king had to go to F3, not E2. That was the best shout. G1 equals queen, white queens, and then black just pushed the E pawn. And we saw a couple more checks, and then white did indeed resign. But it's a bit sort of nerve-wracking, isn't it? Just letting your opponent queen and having to calculate that it's still won because you've got another pawn on E2. It's not a stress I would like, to be honest, at the board. And this original position's in the Undermining section of Dvoretsky's King and Pawn Endgame chapter. And well, I'm going to play it as black. I'm going to play against Stockfish on the hardest level and show you a different plan that is the plan recommended in the book, as you know, it's Undermining basically. So let's do that then. I'll go and continue from here. Play the computer as black. Here we go. And what I'm going to do is, I mean, these two pawns, they just sort of look after themselves. So the Undermining plan is I'm going to come back to B7 with the king. Let's see what Stockfish does. He's probably just going to go back and forth between the E2 and the E3 squares. Because if he doesn't, I'm going to improve these two pawns. Remember, these two pawns, if their floating square reaches the back rank, they're going to promote without the help of my king, and I can forget the Undermining. I can just win with those pawns. I've got to watch this pawn, so I've got to stay in this square. That's not exactly difficult, is it? Because given that I'm in the bottom right hand corner of the board as black looks at it. So I'm going to go King B7. I think white's... okay, so white's realised something's amiss. I think that's a bit premature. That's white sort of giving up. I wish they hadn't done that. Oh, that's annoying. Yeah, I mean, this is just sort of easy now. I might try it again and see if they... Okay, well. I mean, this is just easy now, isn't it? Let me see if I can get... Right, let's try again and see if white does the more sort of human thing. Because there are ways for black to mess this up, having done the Undermining. Let's go there. Please don't push the D pawn again. Hey, okay, so you first undermine, I mean, A6 or A5. I was about to say it doesn't matter. I'm wondering if A5 white can just leave it. They can't, but yeah, A6 or A5 I think white would just have to take it. Let's go A6 and then takes. Something I've sort of learnt going through the Undermining positions is you have to be really, really careful. So I think something that could be quite sloppy here is to push that straight away. We don't want to do that. Take our time, don't hurry. These pawns look after themselves. There's no point rushing into the next stage of the plan of Undermining whilst our king's in a silly place, which is A6. I think we play that. White could push the D pawn, and we could... I think we might just mess that up, actually. So let's come back. Let's see what's white gonna do. Okay, so the computer's played it a bit more from a human point of view this time around. I reckon b5 is good enough, but let's just make absolutely sure. Let's come into c5. Let's just push the white king back a rank. Why not? Now we can undermine this pawn. Takes. Which one should we take first? Should we take this one first? Here we go. Takes that. Now you can see it's done. I was hoping actually back in this position rather than push the b pawn, or maybe actually in this position. If I was playing white in this position, no, I probably would. Or maybe back here. It's like you can see it's going wrong. You could maybe play king f1 and hope that black doesn't play e3, because then black messes up. You always give your opponent a chance to mess it up, but to be honest, if they found this undermining plan all the way over to a6, to b7, sorry, to then play the a6 undermining, and then taking care not to undermine the c pawn whilst your king's stuck on a6, coming all the way back. Where are we up to? We're up to here. I mean, there's nothing else to say there, is there? That's just over. Right, next position. This one's black to play. Pause the video and come up with your winning plan as black, basically. So the first move, you're sort of best off playing something like a4 and then waiting to see what white does next. I mean, again, these two pawns are gonna look after themselves quite happily. I mean, attempts to sort of sort out the king side straight away, they don't work. G6 is a horrendous blunder that actually loses the game. H6, you think, what's the problem now? I can play G5 and white just plays F5, and you're just going to run out of moves. Okay, I mean, you'd have to just push the A pawn, but eventually the white king's just going to go back and forth and your king can't move, so that one's gone. If you played G5, then you haven't lost it, but you have thrown away the win, because now white can play F5, and I mean, you can move your king now, but you can't leave the king side because this h pawn queens, and the white pawn can hold these. The white king, sorry, can hold these two pawns up. So yeah, that's just a draw. So you have to play a4 on your first move, and then white goes g5 check. Now you've only got one winning move here. In the game, I think this was a game from 1934. Yeah, it was. Black played king f5 and has now just thrown away the win. Let's see how they've thrown away the win. So white would just play king c3, and now black has to play f6. If black plays f6, white plays g6, and it's just a hold up on the king side. White's now just going to move their king. There's no way for black to sort out these king side pawns, basically. If the black king comes and takes this pawn, then we push the h pawn. Black would like to play that, but they can't. They'd have to come via g4 and we push the h pawn. There's no way for black to get around and do anything. White's just going to do nothing. You know, even if let me just see it a little bit. If black pushes this pawn, black can't get in. They want to get into g5 and they can't. So white just does nothing. White just moves their king back and forth on a3 and b2, and if the black king comes over, it's not like a two connected past pawns thing where the black can time their perfect run. These white would just win that easily with h6 and then queening the g pawn. So yeah, so at that stage, black had to play f6 and put up with the draw. They've just blundered away the win, and now they just have to sort of agree a draw. They can just move bring their king round to here and just move back and forth as white moves back and forth. But in the game, black blundered with king e6. So they threw away the win, then they threw away the draw. White plays h6. We saw takes, king f6, f5. Pretty similar to the original position, where yeah, black's king just can't move. So the white king's just gonna come and win these two pawns. In fact, the next move has to be b2 or a3, doesn't it? This pawn's just going to fall straight away. So a4's fine, g5, and now the winning move, and the whole point about undermining, like I said earlier right at the start, I found with these undermining things is that you have to be really, really careful how you do it, and because sometimes you get done in by a breakthrough, as was the case here. And king e7 is the winning move, and white's just got nothing against black's plan. I'm going to just king over here, king round to f8. I mean, we can see king g8. White just sort of goes back and forth. Finally, we've got the black king in a nice position. So the black king had to come to h7. You have to come to h7 because if you played f6 at this stage, remember white's still going to play g6 and you can't get to the h pawn. So king all the way around to h7, then play f6. If white pushes the g pawn, then we can go king h6. That's clearly one. If white swaps pawns, that's clearly one as well. So white's got nothing better than just to leave those pawns alone and hope that black now plays g6, so you can play h6 and it would still be a draw. But having done the job, the king coming around to h7 to play the undermining move f6, what the black king now does is go all the way back round. It's very pretty how it works. At any given time, if we were always within the square of the h pawn there, by the way. If white pushed the h pawn, we would just take it and come into, you know, f6, g7, and be fine. And that's it. It's gone. Yeah, really, I really quite like that. It just shows like the care you need in undermining. So a4 first of all. White plays this, and you have to be really careful. Don't come forwards. You'll be, you know, subject to a breakthrough. King e7, and you have to bring king all the way around to h7 before you play the f6 move. The only way to win it is with the f6 undermining move, but you have to have your king in the right place. Just like I did a minute ago against playing that game against Stockfish from the Alekhine game. I mean, Alekhine won anyway, but just, you know, showing a simpler undermining procedure that's not subject to the risk of both sides queening and what's going on next, looking at all the checks. Just take your time, be patient, get your king into the right place, and then do the undermining. I mean, you've got all the time in the world, haven't you? These two pawns are just looking after themselves over there. You've just got, you know, ignoring the 50 move rule, which is, you know, you've got infinite amount of time, or not infinite because of the 50 move rule, but you get what I'm talking about. Right, this one is from 1995. This is black to play. Again, pause the video and decide what would you do. So this game was actually a bit of a calamity. It was played between two players rated way higher than me, so much better players than I am, but it just shows you how hard these king and pawn endings are, because it was just like mistake after mistake after mistake. So black's move here was g5, which completely throws away the game, but white has to find the correct winning plan, and it is an undermining plan. So the winning move straight away, there's only one winning move, and it's pawn to h4. So yeah, pawn to h4 happens, and then we'd maybe see a taking on h4, king back to f3. The black king can come in and try to eat those two pawns. King back to d6, obviously, to stop the c pawn running away. Then we see the undermining from black. But the h pawn queens, and white's won. So in the original position, black should not play g5, because it gives white a chance to undermine, basically, and create a passed pawn on the h file. With the pawn back on g6, the plan doesn't work, because if you push the pawn there, black will just take it, and as soon as your king takes that pawn, the f pawn runs. Whereas the white king taking a pawn on h4, it was fine. We stayed within the square of those, so it was it was okay to snatch that pawn and quickly come back, just enough to hold those pawns up, and then we've still got this passed h pawn and h2. So g5 was a pretty awful move, and h4 should have been played there. But the guy plays king f3, which throws away the win, and it's again winning for black. Black plays the correct first move, which is king d5, White plays c6, which seems pretty sensible. And now black throws the result back at white. So that move there, just chucks the game again. Okay. E4 check was what had to be played. E4 check, king g6, king d6. It's over in a very similar way to before. I mean, what does white even do here? We could maybe try h4, but then you can push the f-pawn straight away. King back, takes, it's gone. It's completely over. So yeah, what black had to play e4 check for some mad reason, I'm not quite sure why, didn't. And then king back to d6. White now played king e4, which gives the win back to black. Okay. This sort of undermining plan by white just evaded him during the game. Had to play this h4 move, and it's won for the same sort of sequence as earlier. In fact, I think we've pretty much transposed that. So yeah, white had to get that h4 undermining move in. As such, it came into e4. Then with black undermined on a6, saw this. Finally, we get the winning plan, but the winning plan is like at least 2 tempi, maybe 3 too late. The black king is in the square of the h-pawn, and white just resigned there. So where were we? It was. In fact, let's just go back to the original because there's other stuff to show. So yeah, we need to show what actually wins. So let's just check I've covered that. So g5 was the wrong move. King f3, king d5, c6, king back to d6. Now white wins with h4. I think I've been through that one. In the game they played king e4 and gave the win to black, who did actually win it. Yeah, so all that remains to be shown is how black should have won this to begin with by not playing g5 and letting white undermine his kingside pawns to create a passed pawn on the h-file. And black wins this fairly simply, to be honest. With I say fairly simply. There's a real subtlety and nuance coming up, actually. So yeah, king d7, king back to f3, king c7, say. White would play h4, and now you can play king b7 here as black. You're still winning, but there's something that's worth seeing actually in this. In fact, let me just show you that if you play king b7's fine. Black's still winning, but when white plays king e4. Here's your chance to chuck away the win. At least it's not a loss this time, it's just a draw. And it's by playing a6. If you play a6, the undermining move, whilst the white king is on e4, white's got a draw using a sort of Reti idea, a dual-purpose king move. Pushes the c-pawn, king into b6, then we take the e-pawn, and we're ready to take on f4. And when the f-pawn runs, king d6, f2, c7. So we sort of draw that in very much the same idea as the Reti idea. So we have to go back to that position where we don't play a6 too early, which is here. Like king b7, like I say, it doesn't throw away the win because you'd play king b7, and when white plays king e4, then you'd mess around with king b8 or something. But it makes more sense just to play king b8 straight away. White's going to come in. White doesn't come into e4 because they don't want you playing a6 whilst their king's on f3. So if the white king comes into e4, you'd go king b7, and when the king comes back to f3, then you push the a pawn, and it's winning. Although actually they could come into e4, and when you play b7, then they could try this h3 trick, and you would have to mess about again. You'd have to come back to c8, king f3, king b8, king e4, and then come into b7 and then push the a pawn. But that's the idea. If white tries to, like, once white's exhausted all their moves, you want to play a6 when the white king is on a3. That's the point. So let's go back to here. Let's say white tries that now, h3. We waste a move, king into e4, force the king back to f3, and then we play the a6 move. And it's done. So yeah, loads of undermining going on in that position. The actual game, like I say, was a bit of a calamity. I mean, maybe maybe the guy did see that if he started trying to do this undermining idea, he saw the Reti idea and just didn't see that extra little triangulation trick that you can play a6 with the white king on f3, maybe. Who knows? But yeah, the actual game, g5 blunders the game away. King f3 blunders it back because black still got time to win this now. c6 the right move, and then yeah, that was the point where black had to play e4 check. So black blundered the game back, white then blundered the game away, and so this h4 move, it was just never coming, and it was so important that white played the undermining move, and then go and create the passed pawn. Maybe they were in time trouble or something. I don't know. Like I say, both these players are just their grades are like they're so much better chess players than I am, for example. And I'm just looking at that position, and maybe I credit myself with too much ability, having retrospectively already seen this position. But it just feels like h4 is the move I want to play. Yeah, I don't know. And then finally, white played the h4 idea, but it was too late, and then they resigned there. So yeah, undermining. Hope people get something from that. The thing I got going through those positions was you really have to take your time on getting your king into the right place before you do the undermining. Although they're saying that in that last game, because both sides had some undermining plans, it was like you had to get on with your undermining early. So I've kind of ended up contradicting myself right at the end of the video. It's good, isn't it?